Hello everyone, welcome. Thank you very much for coming. It's nice to see so many people here. We even had to get in extra chairs, which is always a good sign. This is the first of a series of events run by Saffron and CDR. It's a collaborative event and made possible by the Arts Council. And today we have Jen Hartley, aka Yushh, here. Yeah, we're going to be exploring a little bit. I guess we're going to sort of see a little bit of her sound world from the sort of stuff that we don't really get to see. Obviously, probably quite a lot of you are familiar with her music. But yeah, this sort of session is about finding out a little bit more about how her creative process and how the music comes into fruition behind the scenes, which is I'm also really excited about finding out a bit more about. But yeah, for those of you that might not know Yushh, or if you want to know a bit more, DJ and producer based in Bristol, has had releases on some pretty good labels, Wisdom Teeth, Well Street, Rhythm Section, and many more. But yeah, and also has been running the label Pressure Dome for the last 4 years, and also puts on parties in Bristol. So yeah, we're going to just dive straight in. There's going to be time for questions at the end. So yeah, and then we've got like a roaming mic that we'll be passing around for questions and stuff. But yeah, hello.
Hello.
So yeah, I think it would be good to start with just giving us a little bit of a background about how you got into music. I feel like it's always quite a nice thing to start on.
Cool. Thanks everyone for coming down. I did not expect many people to come, so thank you. Everyone. I suppose my musical journey started when I was I remember my mum had to wait until I was 5 for me to start piano lessons. I was super keen to start piano lessons because my dad played jazz piano when I was a kid. So I really, really wanted to start playing piano, and the piano teacher wouldn't let me start until I was 5. So as soon as I was 5, I started my piano lessons, did all my classical training, and then I did some jazz piano training as well, and then started playing drums and clarinet when I was in school as well. So I did the sort of classical training thing, and then I started getting into electronic music quite young. I had one of the first iPod minis, and just getting MP3s, and just loved like electronica, like quite pretty, beautiful stuff, like Moon Safari, all of that sort of quite easy electronica. And then as I got a bit older, like Aphex Twin and that sort of stuff. But I remember my dad bought like a Proteus 2000, which is like a rack mount synth and Cubase when I was about 14 or 15, and I wrote all of my GCSE music, did that all electronic, and then I went to like a specific college so that I could do music tech for my A-level and stuff. But I never really, 'cause it was always just something I loved, and it was a hobby, and I always had a DAW like on my computer, and I'd always just play with it, but I never really saw it as like a career path. I was real into sport as well when I was a kid, so I was kind of going more down that route, and I have really academic parents, so they were pushing me down another route as well. So I ended up it was always just a hobby. And then it was only like maybe 6, 7 years ago when I quit my job. I had a real human job for a while, and then quit that, and one of the few things that was making me feel like a human at the time. It was a bit of a shitty time, and that was music was the thing that was making me feel normal. So I was like, I'm gonna try and do that. So that's when I moved to Bristol and just started writing music all the time, and did a degree in music production, and yeah, the rest is history, I suppose.
Yeah, it's really interesting how you say you kind of came from, learning acoustic instruments and then moving into electronic. I think quite a lot of people that get into electronic music sort of have that similar trajectory. And so I was interested when you said as well the kind of electronic music that you were first into. Curious to hear what sort of other artists they are before Aphex Twin.
What other artists?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I like Animal Collective, Granddaddy, like all of that sort of indie electronica sort of bandy crossover stuff. But yeah, I think it was when I remember listening to like Aphex Twin and Square Pusher and having that little realization in my mind of like music can be literally whatever you want it to be. It can be as chaotic as you want it to be, or it doesn't have to be like pure like beauty. It can be chaos, you know. And I think that was a real like turning point in what I started looking for in music, is stuff that was like making me feel maybe sometimes uncomfortable, or just making me feel something different. So yeah, and then obviously like I'm of the age where dubstep and drum and bass are a huge influence. It was like when I was, you know, going out for the first time, that's the sort of stuff I'd look to go out and see, because I found it interesting and different and not, you know. Yeah. But then I'm the youngest sort of cousin in my family as well, and all my older cousins were like sending me, you know, UK garage and you know,
and the rest is history.
Yeah. So it's such an amalgamation of like 90s, late 90s sounds, and then going into like the early 2000s dubstep, and so I think I got a lot of good. I was lucky. I got a lot of like directly good influences like growing up, and I didn't really realize how important and how much that would feed into kind of what I'm doing now, but it's still quite a big part of, you know, what I like. So
yeah, I think that like everything that you kind of absorb musically, even from when you're a child, is going to have some sort of influence on now. Not, you know, even the fact that you sort of did the piano from such a young age, that's going to in some way, even if it's not directly, you know, have inspired you to lead to other things. And it's quite interesting, the idea of, you know, the fact that actually the music technology is not really available to learn until you're much older, or a lot of people don't really come into technology and electronic music until they reach their kind of teenage years, and they realise, oh, actually there is other ways to make sound. And yeah, that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is maybe have a little look at one of your projects.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got one up here, obviously. I'll just sort of move back a little bit.
So
yeah, do you want to talk us through what we can see on the screen?
I don't know, like, I thought it might be, I'm very, like, kind of lazy with how I, I like to make the computer do a lot of stuff for me, basically. Yeah, I'm a bit of a nerd, and I love a happy accident, so I quite often just kind of make Ableton do a lot of stuff for me, and then just steal kind of the ideas that it makes for me. So I thought, this is a really early version of a tune that I put out on Well Street Records, and I actually made this as a demonstration for a masterclass thing I was doing for Scuffed during the pandemic, and it was just to show like how you can make Ableton sort of work and do stuff for you. So this is kind of, I mean, I feel like it's kind of basic, but we'll have a little look anyway. So this is Doe. I don't know if you've heard the tune. I'll see if I've got the, I'm not going to find it now. But this is obviously not coming through the speakers. So if I just go through like some of the parts, so I've just got this is like the percussion sort of like group, and it's all just set up on these like mono sequences that are all kind of going through randomly. This is a trick I like to use all the time. So getting to velocity, like using the velocity, not just to change the amplitude of something or like the loudness of something, but using it to like gate the output of a MIDI channel. So it's getting triggered every time, but I've set it so that the velocity is randomizing every time, and then I've gated what notes are actually coming out. So it's only going to play notes at a certain probability, if that makes sense. And then, yeah, just a load of different mono sequences, just playing things that are all going to kind of give a different result, like every bar. But there's some sort of limitations that keep it so that it's always going to make sense, if that makes sense. So like, even though it's playing the notes randomly, it's still going to be playing the same sort of key of the notes on every bar. So it feels kind of semi-normal, even though it's changing every time. So I think that's one thing I got taught like quite early on, was about balancing the level of like chaos with something that people can like latch onto as well. Just always keeping that in mind when I'm doing stuff, of having something that's kind of familiar for people to latch onto, while also keeping it interesting enough so it doesn't get boring. So that's what I've kind of done with all of these, like the drum patterns on here, and then got like a similar thing going on these like tuned percussion things. They're just constantly doing something slightly different each time. And then I've got it set up so that I've got this bus here, which is just like 2 pads. I don't know if people use the convolution reverb that you get with Max for Live. It's really good. I use it all the time. You don't just have to use it as a reverb though. I use it quite a lot to generate like pads, because you can take something like a drum pattern and kind of impart the movement of that drum pattern into your pad, so you're constantly already getting some movement in whatever you're doing. And this is just being, so every time I send like a and because it's on a convolution reverb, like the convolution reverb works by picking up certain frequencies and then sort of reacting with those frequencies. So if I have something that's like a higher, using the higher frequencies, you can hear it's like also bringing that out like in the pad. Whereas if I have something that's got, I can make it more full or whatever. So it's quite a like controllable way to make a pad like move in the way that you want it to.
Jen, could you show us that soloed so that we can hear it? Just
Not
like
really.
the drum sound, like what you showed me.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't worry about
I
that.
mean, I can. I mean, not really, because it's being triggered by the drums, so I kind of have to have the drums like playing. So you can hear the drums are just on their own, but if I send like that to the bus, it's then kind of reacting and creating that. So the more I send, the more that pad's going to react, like more that's.
Yeah, that's what I wanted you to show us.
And then, I was going to show this other little thing on this one as well. So I always like trying like things called ear snacks. So things that just fill the little gaps in the space. So sometimes I'll just have like a field recording or something I've done, and then I'll sidechain the whole recording like really strongly to the master. So it's getting like pushed down. And then only in the gaps these little bits are coming out, and then I'll process those like some more. So this one I've got this like, let's see if we can have it. If I can turn it, I'll just turn everything off.
my gosh. What is that? It's so disgusting. I don't know why.
Kind of distracting, like when it's going on the whole time, but I've got it so it's being really like heavily compressed by the kick, and then it's going through a gate, so it's just popping through when the kick's not on, and then I've got it then being triggered by another one of the percussion sounds, so it's kind of popping in sort of in time with the project, but just giving like a little sort of beer snack, as I like to call it, like just to kind of keep things interesting. And because it's like it's vocal, like a human sound, it's already got a lot of interesting information in it. You know, it's always going to be different every time you hear it. Yeah, that's like using like natural recordings, and is like the easiest way to get free modulation in sounds. You know, because you can just gate them or whatever, and you've got something that's constantly changing the whole time you've got your track going. So yeah
Thank you. I feel like generally with a lot of your tunes, it feels one of the things that stands out to me is like the grooves, and it's interesting to see that you process your drums in this way. Do you do this for all of your drums, or?
So this is like super early stages. So this is just like ideas. I'll like automate all of the different sequences and stuff, so that they're hitting different notes and doing different things, and then I'll record something for a really long time, and then just find the good bits. And then when I show you the next project, I'll show you like how anal I am about cropping everything up. Shall I open the other project?
Open the other project. But just before that, I'm also curious to know how you find inspiration for creative ideas. So when you go to the studio, what's your process? You know, if you're starting a new project, do you just open Ableton and kind of just have a go, or is there another way that you work?
I have like loads of different creative processes. If I'm like feeling emotional, it's kind of rare for me, but like if I'm feeling super emotional, like then then I want to express that emotion. I'll go in the studio and like I will just sit on my keyboard and I will find a nice sound and I'll just play, and I won't think about drums, and I'll just want to like make the sound that I'm feeling, and just feel like, and just record and try and emulate the feeling that I have in my body, Whereas if I'm not feeling emotional, then I'll kind of approach it in a bit more of a like feedback way, where I'll just go in the studio and I'll just play and try and make interesting sounds and just do sound design, record until I have a really large sound palette of things to play with, and then go with that.
And do you find it harder to write music with something in mind? I know that we have spoke about this before, but say if you have like an EP on the horizon, writing music for something like that, like how does that
I think
change
it's really stunting, like having something to write for. Personally, like I've done it for a few labels, and I think I learnt that lesson quite quickly, of being caught up inside your own head and kind of worrying too much about what the label wants or what the label expects, or worrying about, I still do it with like even my own tunes, who I'm not even writing anyone for, like, oh, who's going to listen to it, like worrying about everyone else rather than actually worrying about just doing your thing. But I think, as I say, it's a lesson I learned quite early on, so I don't really write for anyone anymore. I'll just say no and then when I finish something that I'm happy with, then I'll just wait until the right label approaches, and then I got something like ready to go.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I think a lot of people that make music and that produce music probably also have similar feelings. It's like a lot harder to when you know that you have to do something for someone or like an EP or something, it can be really tricky because you're constantly sort of listening to the other stuff on the label and thinking, does my music fit in? And then getting feedback and stuff. I think getting feedback sometimes is really useful with music because it can really open up things, especially if you're feeling like stuck on a project. But sometimes also it can really slow the process down if you kind of if you know what you want to make.
Yeah, I think like feedback's one of those things where you have to be quite. You have to. If you want to get feedback from someone, you want to know what you want to get feedback on. There's no point in like sending someone a tune and being like, "What do you think?" You know, because they're always gonna probably give you the feedback that you don't want. You know, because it's your tune at the end of the day, and you know what you like about it. So don't get them to make you feel bad about the things that you like. You know, it's your output, it's your creative output, so it doesn't matter if one person comes back and doesn't like that bit. If you have a specific thing that you are not sure about in a tune, or you want someone to like give you tips on the mix or something, then send it over, ask for specific feedback on that thing, because you don't want to lose your confidence on the thing that you're happy with and the thing that's yours, you know. So it's something about learning the boundaries and getting the right people who you trust and, you know, will give you the right feedback. And like, I just don't really send my music anywhere anymore because I'm so stubborn. I just know what I want it to sound like, and I know like when that's the other thing with my creative process actually that I didn't really mention is like I very much set myself like targets and like mini goals in my head of like what I want to achieve in my music and in my output, and I feel like I know when I've achieved those goals. Like I know when I've, you know, what I want to achieve, because it's very hard to have perspective on your own music, but when you've kind of set these things in your head, then it kind of gives you little markers of when you've achieved what you want to achieve, you know. So I think
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. Okay, let's open up the next project. Is this it?
Yeah. Should we listen to it first? Like.
Yeah. Let's listen to a clip of it before.
I had it up somewhere. So this is. So yeah, that was off my Wisdom Teeth EP. I've got a sort of semi-early version of the tune. So this tune I actually wrote in like 2019, and it was, I had like such set goals in my head of what I wanted to achieve with a track, and this is the first tune that I felt like I achieved what I wanted to do. I wanted it to be super like stripped back and minimal, but have enough detail to keep it really like interesting all the way through. And I also wanted to limit myself to like basically one bit of audio, like to do the whole thing. So I I'm really obsessed with like micro sound, really tiny little fragments of sound, and keeping things interesting in that way. So I love crackle at the end of vinyl, so you can probably hear quite a lot of that. So there's like, I've got the this is the initial recording, and it's all basically like vinyl resampling, but it's using the effects on my mixer and the ends of vinyls, so not when any music's playing, like just compressing like the crackle at the end of vinyl and putting it through effects, and then speeding up and slowing down vinyl, and yeah, so there's this recording here, and this is just me basically fucking about with different vinyl and trying to get interesting sounds using just like a Pioneer mixer basically, and whatever I could get. So see if I think of there we go, some crackle. So this is just good. Everyone loves spiral effect on the old yeah, so this is spiral, probably a little bit of dub echo on. What's this? More crackle. But yeah, everything in this tune, apart from the pad, is made up from this one recording. One recording that I did. That's me just like chucking their fader up really, really quickly, and then putting it through the, what's it called? Is it flange or one of those? There you go. That's like the sound that's used loads in the tune. That's also used. So reverb and just really, really slow, like pitch down vinyl. Some more lovely noise. But yeah, so, and then after that, it just goes into crazy chopping up chaos, basically. So yeah, what should we have a look at? Let's have a look at normal percussion. There is some normal percussion in there. I did put some normal hi-hats and stuff in. But oh yeah, that's what I was going to show you as well. This is the only other thing I used. So these glitches I've made with a mate of mine using his modular. And then this is one way I like to sort of again create new rhythms. So let's have a little listen to this channel. So this is like just another Max for Live device, polybeat. So you can set it so that it triggers stuff over different rates, over different spaces. So it's really good for creating like interesting rhythms. And you can see, I don't know if you can see, it's kind of not great, but I've just automated when different triggers are coming on. So it's creating these different like patterns the whole time. Is it here where it's got? So I just let that run basically and do its thing for a while I'm automating stuff, and then I choose all the bits that I find interesting, and then crop them out. And then this is another way I like to use Ableton to do the work for me. Let's see if I can get a better view. So these are all recordings I did in Castle Park of me just hitting stuff with like sticks. So you can see they're all just quite short, transient, like little sounds. But I've set them all so they've got different follow actions. So whenever one triggers, it will play for a certain amount of time, and then it will trigger something else, and then you can change like the length of how long it will trigger for, and that will then give you different rhythms again. So if I have some that will trigger for like one beat, some trigger for like half a beat, some will trigger for 2, so it will kind of give all these different rhythms. So, sorry. Free rhythm. And you can see it's just all like slightly triggering at different speeds.
So, just a question: with something like this, would you kind of like play around with it in like the live view, and then record it in, and then start to chop up like little bits? Because obviously, you know, it's, even though there is a flow to like the groove and the drums within your work, there is also that you know, it's not just completely crazy. Like, it's like very like continuous and.
Yeah, I think
changing.
it's just like what I was saying before about the balance of sort of like chaos and keeping people sort of in tune with it. It's like there's certain bits where that I really like that I've just like looped over, for example, like this. Which makes it subtle, but it keeps everything sort of in place, you know. And then I'll have other ones that are just doing crazy stuff. Yeah, I mean, the kick always keeps everything generally in line as well. But yeah, there's certain bits that I think provide like enough rhythm to make things feel normal, and then it's all the little edits. You know, I just go in like bar by bar and just think like, right, I'll maybe do like 16 bars and then I'll copy it over so that it's kind of like normal. You've got 16 and then you've got another 16, but then I'll change the second lot so that it's got that. Yeah, exactly. Just give things space, and yeah, I think giving things space is like a big part of my production as well. You know, like just making sure everything's got its own little gap, and yeah, that makes me happy.
And then in terms of like plugins and other sort of like effect software, are there any plugins that you use quite frequently that you just keep returning to and use on like a lot of your projects?
So I like stuff that's got loads. Like I love step sequenced effects, and I love stuff that's got lots of like modulation like capabilities. So just anything that's got loads of LFOs. So I love the unfiltered audio stuff. I don't know if has this got any. This has got Infiltrator on. I don't know if people have used Infiltrator before. I think I actually just put Infiltrator on because I had a different plug. Basically, I had to work all afternoon to get this project so that we could even listen to it, because I work on my desktop and so I have like no plugins and stuff on here. But Infiltrator is one I use quite a lot. It's like a step sequenced effect, so you can set up all these different steps, every one with a different effect, different LFO, different envelope, and then just have them turning on and off. Like, so if we have a little listen to it without, let's have a go. It's just kind of adding those extra little like, so that's just without. So yeah, anything with like step sequenced effects or loads of LFOs, and I'm super keen, basically. Let me see if I've got one with unfiltered. Is this got it on? Yeah, this is Biome, which I use all the time, and you can just pile on loads of different effects, and then you can. It kind of works in like a modular way, so you can set up gates and different LFOs. What's this What channel are we even on now? Sorry. Sorry. So yeah, this is one that I use all the time, and it's basically just like a stutter effect and a multi-tap delay, and it just adds, because I've got the sample and hold like on a slightly off time, it means that everything's going to be different every time. Yeah.
Thank you. And then in terms of, obviously, you've spoken about your approach to audio. I think that was really interesting with the vinyl recording. And I always find for me, like, it's much more interesting to use recordings that you've sort of like recorded yourself in your work, just because it kind of like, it feels more personal, but also the kind of sounds that then the audio that you're working with, it sort of stands out. And it's, if you've recorded it live, like field recordings and stuff, it has that, like you said earlier, like so much more information that you can work with and process. But I'm curious also to know, like, do you always work like in the box, or do you ever use hardware as well with when you're making music?
Yeah. Oh, I took a photo. I was supposed to put it on my setup. But yeah, so in a similar way to like at the time that I made that tune in 2019, I didn't really have much hardware, so I was always just trying to find different ways of like giving myself an interesting and like new sound palette to work with, because like I started straight in the box, and I think it's great to just limit yourself. Like I think it's the best way to learn. It's just like, don't buy something unless you know how to use it. Like if you don't know how to use like Ableton synthesizers, then I don't, it can help you learn, by using an external synth, but don't spend the money until you know the sound that you wanna make and stuff, and I was very adamant about that, and also very skint to the point where I was just like, well, I can't afford to buy any synths, so I'm just going to have to make everything that Ableton has given me like sound good. So for a very long time I was just trying to find different ways of like making interesting sounds that didn't cost me money, and like with things I already had. But now I have upgraded, but my workflow hasn't really changed. Like I always think sitting in the studio and telling yourself I need to make a tune is quite a daunting like thing, if you don't have anything to reference or anything to work with. And so I've always, like, when I've got the time, I will spend just a day not thinking about what kind of tune I want to make or what, anything like that really, and just not look at my computer and just make sounds and record and just try and just make something that I think is interesting, that is usable in whatever context, and kind of be quite free with it. And then the next day, when I've got all of these things that I've recorded and I've spent the time recording, I've got loads of material to work with. So it's basically, you can see this project now is just audio really. It's just paint by numbers of I've got these cool sounds, like now it's just kind of fitting them in the gaps and making them sound like cohesive. And when you limit your sound, that's the other thing I do like all the time, is like if you limit your sound palette and just kind of restrict yourself to a few sounds, then the tonality of those sounds will fit however you process them. If you overwork them, which I do like constantly, that the sounds that you've got are going to work with the other sounds in your project, because they're all within the same little sort of group of sounds that you've got, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and it's also, I think it's a really classic thing to kind of, when you feel like you don't know what else to do to a project, to just throw more stuff at it. And I think, I guess if you have good like plugins, and if you have a good knowledge of Ableton, then I guess you're able to affect and process those sounds differently each time, but so that it all sort of sounds succinct.
Yeah, it was a shame because I really wanted to show. I'm like working on a remix at the minute for Max Keelan, and like I don't know if anyone else knows Max Keelan, but he makes like industrial like post-punk stuff. So the stems I got sent were a vocal and a drum, like, and that was that, and they were really noisy. But the limitation I set myself on like that project was, right, I'm gonna make everything apart from maybe some melodic parts, but I'm going to make everything out of those two stems. And it's amazing when you really like push yourself with limited sort of like things, what you can achieve with not a lot, you know.
Did you say that was a remix or a collaboration?
It's a remix.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, because you've done quite a lot of remixes as well. I was just going to ask you how, obviously that's one way of approaching it, but if you were given more than two things, how would you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, every remix is different. That one, I don't know. I enjoyed the challenge. I thought I might as well challenge myself to do that. Some of the like sometimes it depends how much I like the song with how much I'm going to respect the remix. I think, like sometimes I get asked to do a remix and then I listen to the song and I'm like, oh, it's not. I don't really like it that much. And then I will listen to the stems and I'll be like, I don't really like any of these stems.
There's only like
and
one
so
thing.
So I'll basically just make my own tune and then find a marker, you know, from the original, and make it a remix. But yeah, I mean, every tune's different. I mean, the first remix I did was for one of my really good mates, Ollie Size, and it's a like 140 techno thing. And I was like, right, I need to make the opposite. Obviously, it's a remix. So I think I slowed it down to like, I think it's like 100 BPM. And when you slow stuff, like when you slow audio down, obviously it degrades and it doesn't sound as good. So I was like, how am I gonna do this? Like, so I just got his whole tune and I put it through my mate's modular through all the resonators. So it's got the same rhythm of the original, but it's all just being like resonated through this modular, and that's how I got like the main sort of like hook through the tune. So I feel like I was semi like, you know, respectful. Yeah. I made the rhythm out of it, but yeah, so yeah, it just depends really. I think it's nice like having a remix though, because you obviously just automatically have loads of stuff to play with. So
yeah, you're not starting on a blank canvas.
Yeah.
You've got actual stems.
Yeah.
And yeah.
But it's just another thing. It's like I try not to listen to the tune too much and just get the stems, process them like I would how I'd normally do a tune. So just like process and do the sound design first and then make my tune, and then I got loads of stuff to work with that's mine.
And then in terms of like collaborations as well, when you're working with someone else on creating a track, obviously there's lots of different ways to approach that. What way works best for you?
I really love getting in the studio with people. I think it's like the best way to learn. I always find like just sitting for an hour and just jamming and watching how someone else approaches something, even if you're getting to like a similar result, it's always really nice to see how other people work. So like I did a collab release on Pressure Dome, which came out, I don't know, 6 months ago or something, and that was, I've got 5 tunes on there, all with different like mates who I've been working with, and we all like sat in the studio, but we don't do the weird thing of like hovering over each other's shoulder. We like always make sure that you've got your laptop, I've got my laptop, and we just jam and we just record and we just see what happens. And it's a lot more fun than sort of being like, oh, I've got an idea and like move over, you know, and it can get a little bit like too much pressure, you know, on one person at a time to do something. Whereas if you're both just like jamming and making sounds, it's a really nice, it's usually like a really easy process, you know, you just do that for an hour and then there's a tune somehow.
Yeah, I think that there's something like, I think that it is it's just so interesting as well to see how other people make music and work, and get inspiration. And I think for people that are kind of, you know, producing on their own quite a lot as well, it's really good if you have friends or anyone that you know that kind of does that, like, because everybody works differently and there's no right or wrong way to make music, especially when it comes to electronic music. Like, the world is literally your oyster. There's so much that you can do, and everyone's going to have completely different processes, and but you can learn things that you know that you can then take into your own projects and take forward. Tips and tricks. Yeah. 100%. Cool. So yeah, I mean, I guess we're gonna do some questions in a moment, but I kind of wanted to end like this part of the conversation on just wondering if you have anything to say to people that are like aspiring producers or people that might be in the room that have just sort of started out, or anything useful that you might have wanted to hear, or, you know, when you were sort of started making music.
Nothing's ever finished. Learn to let go. Like, you're always gonna listen to a tune after you've had it mastered a few months later and be like, oh, I wish I'd changed that, or wish I'd done that differently. But just let go. It's done. There is no end, but there is letting go and being proud of where you're at that moment, and being like, yeah, next time I'll do that better or whatever. It's fine. That took a long time. And then what else? Enjoy the fact that there's no end. I think that's the reason I love music so much. It's like there is no end. There is no I'm finished. There is no I'm the best. You know, there is just always more to learn, more to improve on, and more to express, like, emotionally, and yeah. And then I think that's it, really.
That's good. Thank you. Thanks very much, Jen. Okay, cool. So we're going to open up the room to some questions, but I don't know where the roaming mic is. Can anyone help? Where? Oh, there. Oh, yeah, great. It's over there. That's good. I can't see anyone, but if you just stick your hand up if you have a question. Does anyone have any questions? We must have some questions. Yeah.
Ooh. You've got a label. When people send you tracks, what do you look for? Why do you reject tracks, if you do reject tracks?
I wouldn't say I reject, I just don't email back.
And why do you do that?
I mean, people are lucky if I even listen to them. I'm the worst person on my emails. But yeah, I think what I look for on the label is stuff that you can't really tell what it is. You can't really say that it's dubstep or techno or whatever. It's just doing its own thing. I obviously love sound design and interesting stuff, and I think that's the main thing I look for, is just something that's like feels like it's doing something new and interesting, and is like kind of smart with how it's doing it and not too obvious, and someone who's created their own little world. I think that's what I love. It's funny, like, it's one of those things that I wouldn't be able to specifically say what it was, but I remember, like, for the last vinyl I did, I'd been had one of those final days where I was like, I'm finally getting through all my demos. Had a whole day of being like, these are all shit, and then listen to this, and I was just like, okay, instantly emailed. You know, it's just that kind of thing of listening to something and being like, this is what I've been looking for all day, and it just kind of stands out. I don't know why, but you know, it's doing something interesting for me. And that's that.
Just as a quick question to jump in there, when someone is sending you sort of demos, what way, because I think this is quite an interesting question, and quite a lot of people ask me this when I do some one-to-one mentoring sessions, but what way do you find is the best format for people to send you music?
SoundCloud.
Yeah,
I hate it when people send me stuff that I have to download.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have time for that. Like, yeah, SoundCloud, it says it's the one thing it says on the Pressure Dome Instagram page is SoundCloud links only. Because, yeah, like Google Drive, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's
What
yeah.
what a shit system. Yeah, no, if I can just flick through a SoundCloud link, not plug up my hard drive, perfect. That's the way to do it.
There you go. SoundCloud only. Anyone else have any more questions?
Come on, don't be shy.
How conscious are you of not stealing but borrowing musical ideas? I.e., will you hear a song and try and recreate that sort of sound palette, or do you?
Yeah, I don't think there's a problem with doing that at all, because like everyone is so. You can try all you want to recreate a C Mosel tune or whatever. You're never gonna do it. Like, you can try, but it's always gonna sound like you. That's the other thing I should have said. It's like, stop worrying about your sound. Like, you are your sound. Like, there is no such thing, you know. Like, whatever you make is always gonna be you. So don't worry about trying to be a certain thing, you know. Everything is always going to sound like you. The tune the tune I put on Wisdom Teeth called Same Same. I wanted to make a tune that sounded like old Pev, so I dragged an old Pev tune into my project and I made that tune. It doesn't sound like Pev, it's still me, like, but it's and that was my reference point, you know. Like, I don't think there's ever a problem like referencing unless you're you know, completely just stealing all the samples from the tune, but it's always just going to sound like you, so I have no problem with that.
We'll do a slight follow-up, or not just a small one, but just what is it that you're finding yourself influenced by in the last year or currently? Is it local, or
I don't know. I don't really think about my like influence so much when I'm sitting in the studio of like what I want to make. I think influence is such a like comes from so much of your musical history that you're always it's just gonna flow into whatever you do. And I think I've been like DJing a lot recently, so I think that's kind of feeding a lot more into the music I'm making. I'm trying to make more like I really struggle making like really straight dance like music. I think it's something I always just want to put a nice pad on something, you know. So I think it's just, yeah, as I say, like there's a subconscious thing, and I don't really try and let it drive me too much when I'm in the studio. I just let it happen, you know.
Anyone else? Yeah. Is there a question at the back? I can't actually see. Sorry.
How do you kind of tell the difference between what's ear candy and what's clutter when you're making your tracks?
Take it out. Do you need it? That's the best way. To turn it off, turn it on again. I think that's, yeah. I mean, generally, if you think it might be getting in the way, it's probably getting in the way. So, I think, yeah, just it's all about trying to just turning things on and off again, and seeing what works together, and being aware of like the frequency ranges of all of your tracks, so that you know kind of what's cluttering each other up. But yeah, there's definitely like my mix process is a lot of deleting and a lot of muting stuff, and being like, do I really need that there? Or is it kind of just getting in the way of other elements? And it's amazing how much you think you've made this really cool sound, and maybe you have made a really cool sound, and you want to have it in the tune, but you realise it's completely like sort of blocking out everything else that you've got going on. So it's not, you haven't lost it. You've got something else to use in another tune, and it's about being kind of a little bit ruthless with yourself and being like, I love that sound, but I don't need it right now.
I think that it's really hard to do sometimes, because especially if you've been working on something for so long, it's hard to not you have to not be precious about stuff. But it is really hard to do that. I think especially if you've been listening to the same thing for quite a long time, turning everything down and then just like bringing things up is a really good way to do that.
Yeah, and trying not to over listen to stuff is so hard as well. You know, when you
Give yourself space.
Yeah, it's so hard. You know, doing a bounce and then being like, right, I'm just going to go and listen to it 100 times. Just to see if I can work out.
To it in all
and
these different contexts.
And then you get used to it sounding shit. But yeah, it's all little battles of learning these things where you have to restrain yourself from making shit decisions, basically. But
I think taking space from tunes as well is really good. So like make something, and then if you get to the point where you just don't really know what else you can do, it's good to just like leave it for a week, don't listen to it.
Yeah.
And then when you come back to it, you're always going to hear something in there that you just didn't even hear at all before.
Yeah, well, it's quite funny with this one because, as I said, I made this in 2019 and I opened up the first version of it. And the thing is, I knew when I first made this tune that it was what I wanted to achieve, but it wasn't not in any way what I wanted it to achieve, like mix-wise. Like, it did not sound at all how I wanted it to sound, even though I'd achieved like these other goals. So I opened up the first one, and I was just like, oh my God, this sounds so bad. And then had to like drag in like with the new kick I'd done and the new thing, because it took me like 3 years later until I'd learnt that much more for me to be able to go back to this project and mix it and make it sound how I actually wanted to hear it, if that makes sense. So it just, I think like the mix down is one thing that I have spent so long getting, like training myself to do, and like because I mix stuff for lots of different labels, and it's so important. I think it's a really important part of your sound. I've always wanted to sound like me, and I think the mix down, everyone thinks it's like a set of rules, and you need to be in these frequency ranges, and you need to do this, but it's so much more than that. It's such a like big part of the creative process of being able to get it to sound how you want it to sound, and that's taken me a really long time. So I'm really happy that I actually managed to get this tune out, because there was times when I'd just be like, I have this really good tune, but it sounds shit, you know. And then finally having the patience to be like, right, I think I'm at the point where I can do it now, you know.
Or sometimes just having a project that you love, but knowing that it's not like you know you can't get it to sound as good as it can. You can just park it and then come back, even in like a year or something. Like I've still got loads of projects. I revisited one the other day that I hadn't listened to for 2 years, and at the time I didn't know how to make it sound any better. And then I listened to it the other day, and I was like, oh, there's so much that I can do in this to make it sound better. Because obviously in those 2 years you learn so much more.
And it's fine to be patient. I think there's a lot of people who it took me 5 years to release my first EP. I only did that this year, start of this year. And like, I think it's so many people just I want to do my first EP, I want to release something like right now, you know, and I want to be part of this right now. And that's really exciting, and it's fun, and it's cool. But I was so adamant that I needed it to sound the way I wanted it to sound. And I was so frustrated, you know. I was so frustrated for such a long time because I knew what I wanted to achieve, and I just couldn't do it, you know. And it was like, I was really proud of eventually, like, I was really proud of myself that I waited until I did it the way I wanted to do it. And I'm actually really proud of the EP now, because I think if I'd like done it earlier, I would have been asking all those questions like, I wish I could have done this better or whatever. So
I think there's something to be said as well, like everything, especially since COVID, seems to be so much more like hypey, and everything's on Instagram, everything's a lot faster. And I think that there's something to be said about taking your time and kind of like honing your craft, and it's a long game. It takes a long time to get to that point.
I don't know, if you want to do an edit, it's fine. But it's just, I think if you really care and like really want to, like, there's no rush, you know. Some people are just like that good, they can just push something out, but I'm not. It took me ages, but I'm happy I waited.
Yeah, and you're going to have a catalogue of work that you look back on that you're really proud of, so I think it's worth doing that.
For sure.
Is there any more questions? Oh, whoa! Everyone's been thinking. We've been chatting way too much. Okay, let's go over here.
Hello. So you mentioned about how you're at a stage before when you were working for labels and sometimes being like, oh, I've got to make something. And it just got me thinking a bit of perspective. I feel a bit like I'm basically working full time and also running a festival store at the same time. And I'm almost at the opposite point of like having, very new to it all, but having lots of ideas and not much time. And I was wondering, how would you like creatively approach that problem of like having not much time but like really like loads of enthusiasm?
So, yeah, I mean, I'm in a really similar position a lot of the time as well, where I haven't got a lot of time. And it's about, again, like what I said earlier about not putting too much pressure on yourself to finish a tune. Like, just if you've got an hour, just be like, right, I'm going to do some hi-hats for an hour. I'm going to do some really sick hi-hats for an hour. And I'm going to have my hi-hats on lock for when I do finally have like a few hours to come down and do it. And just using the little bit of time to like not be like, I need to finish a tune, and be just hone in on one little thing and just do that and achieve something, so that when you've got the time, like later down the line, you've got all these little chunks of things that you've done and you're happy with, and then it will all come together like a lot easier.
Thank you. Who else? Yep. Should we go that way?
Uh-oh. It's a nice question. So I think it's fair to say that you have achieved a hell of a lot in this past year. So congratulations. And so I guess my question is for you, like, what is next? Do you have a bucket list? What is on it? What is next?
Well, I want to actually have some time to go in the studio. So the bucket list is maybe quitting my day job finally, so that I can do music full time, which has only really felt like a realization since I got back from touring, because I was just like, okay, I feel like music may be doing its thing right now, so I think maybe now is the time for me to do that, because I've hardly written anything all year really. I've done a few remixes and stuff, but it's been really frustrating because I'm kind of been in that limbo period of, should I do it? Like, should I take the plunge? So, and then I've got like, I know what I want to achieve like musically. I want to like finish an album. I feel like I'm at the stage of like confidence to sort of let go a little bit more emotionally with the stuff I'm making. So I want to do like a super, which is kind of on its way already, but like I want to do like a super soft boy album, really, really beautiful, sound designy, nice stuff, and at the same time release a really fuck off techno EP. And that's just kind of pushing me in the complete opposite direction. Because I think there's so many people who, as I was saying before, like feel like they need to pigeonhole themselves too much, and I think it would be a nice little middle finger to that, to do something like that. And so that's my kind of like musical goal. And then, there's like, I've got a list of labels who I'd love to release with, but I think it's all just see what happens really.
Cool. I think just the one there.
Is there anything non-musical that you take inspiration from?
My feelings.
Feels.
I think that's it, really. Though I think.
Like literacy or plays.
Yeah, I know. I wish I was more interesting. But at the end of the day, I'm really not. Like I'm very focused on music. So I think I do get inspired by stuff, but I don't read much. I don't watch much TV. I'm very boring at the end of the day. I just go out, DJ, listen to music, go home, write music, and continue. So yeah, sorry, I can't really give you much more of an exciting answer than that.
Cool, thank you. I think there's no more questions now. So yeah, thank you again. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.